This is American Made, and I'm Ann Vandersteel. Welcome to episode 2, We the Chattel. Is the United States still a constitutional republic, or have we become something completely different? When you were born, you were granted citizenship. Or did you actually become collateral for a financial system designed to profit off of your labor? In today's second episode of American Made, we are going to be breaking down how the government actually uses your existence to generate revenue, why every American is tied to a system of perpetual debt, and how we can actually reclaim our sovereignty. The truth is, they don't want you to know any of this. On our journey today, we are joined by my co-host and co-founder of American Made Foundation and American Made Action, Maureen Steele. Maureen, as always, great to see you. This is an important episode in this curriculum of, what I call education for the American public. So welcome. Thanks for being here.
Good to be here, Ann, as always.
As always. So let's take us back in history, because as with everything, history has been rewritten. And what our constitutional founders, the people who, as you say, drafted the most beautiful love letter for the American people and chartered this country under a very limited government system, it has been completely, so we say, bastardized. Is that too strong of a word, or has it just been rewritten into something else? And the financial piece of it has really created a debt slave society. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely it has. And it's been going on for generations, Ann. And I think that's where so many Americans are in the dark, that this isn't new. And I know with Doge and all that's been coming out lately, people think, it's become so corrupt. No, it's been so corrupt. We just didn't know. We were all just completely in the dark. So, I always speak of G. Edward Griffin's book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, because it is so well written. It's written in such a way that even an economist can completely understand what they did back in the early 1900s, in 1913, on Jekyll Island. They created this creature, and it's called the Fed, the Federal Reserve, and that is the root of all financial evil in our country right now. It's why we have fiat. It's why we're on the verge of financial collapse.
We are on the verge of financial collapse, and it doesn't seem that we're taking our foot off the gas. And I want to address that a little bit later on in the show, because I think there is a plan afoot in Trump's big, beautiful bill, because it is going to increase the debt by $5 trillion. And people are up in arms about that. And any sane person should be. But if you are trying to rid yourself of this creature from Jekyll Island, namely the Federal Reserve, maybe you want to hasten the death as quickly as possible. So we'll get to that. But let's kind of walk through what happened on Jekyll Island, because these folks got together in 1910. It was a secret meeting with Rockefeller, the Morgans, JP Morgan, and of course the Rothschild Group. These were all people that got together to create this blueprint for what we now call today central banking. And then, as you said, in 1913, the Federal Reserve Act was passed. They did it in the dead of night during a Christmas holiday break, a recess. And G. Edward Griffin actually dubbed this really a cartel disguised as a government agency. And you and I have talked about agencies. They're not even constitutional. So walk us through the architects of this Federal Reserve. What did they stand to gain by creating a central bank?
Well, they stood to gain total control over who had the money. It's really kept all of us as debt slaves. They control when money is printed. They're the ones that created the fiat dollar. Our Constitution states that money has to be backed by something: gold, silver, minerals in the earth. Like, it has to be backed by something of value. The only thing of value backing the American dollar right now is what you said at the beginning of the show, and it's us. It's right. The hard work of the American people. We're the chattel here. So to have dollars, and this is what the Federal Reserve, this agency, approves, that is worth nothing, that our gold is gone. It is all a product too, and what people don't understand is, and they're starting to, is what a tangled web this is. The Federal Reserve is part of the City of London, and the City of London isn't Big Ben as people know it. It is the banking system there, and there's these little pockets all around the world, and the money just kind of spins around those. This is the deep state. I mean, this is really what it is, and these bankers and these wealthy men created it. They created it so they could stay wealthy. The rest of us would stay debt slaves, and that they could control everything. They could control the banks. They can control the value of that dollar. They can control what backs that dollar. And this is where we're at today. They keep printing more money. The more they print, the less value our dollar has. And we're on the verge of a collapse, just like Japan is seeing right now.
Right.
We're a breath away from it.
We're a breath away from it. And yeah, what's going on in Japan is really a harbinger. It's a canary in the coal mine of things to come. And that canary flew into the coal mine in 1971 when President Nixon temporarily, I air quotes, temporarily suspend the convertibility of US dollars into gold. That was really, that's where Bretton Woods went to die, in fact. And this removal or this final constraint on government spending and debt creation is what we now are seeing and witnessing in this inflation that we're seeing on an exponential level. And of course, the fiat currency, the currency backed by nothing, because currency is not money. It's a representative form of money, but it's now being printed without backing. So what do you think was Nixon's reason for taking us off the gold standard? Was, because it had an immediate impact on wages. And of course, we're now seeing, wages can't keep up with inflation. So why would he do this?
Well, I think we have to look at why any of our leaders do some of the things that they do. I had just written an article a couple weeks ago on Kissinger, and I believe, and some of the research I did on this article is that he's behind it. He was in Nixon's ear. I think Nixon was the fall guy for a lot. I think he was wise to the deep state, and we've seen that with JFK. We're seeing it with Trump. We saw it with Reagan. When you want to keep us on the gold standard, when you want to be America First agenda, when you don't want to have dealings with the deep state, they take you out. They destroy you. They ruin you. And we see that in Washington today. Everyone, once they get in there, everyone stays silent. So I think it was a deep state issue to again try to harm America, harm our financial system, and harm the people. The New World Order and the One World Order has been in the making for, like I said, for generations, and really in earnest since the Creature of Jekyll Island, since 1910.
Right. So inflation, it's not a glitch. It's definitely by design. It's a feature of this fake system, this fiat system. Every new dollar that's printed basically devalues the ones that are already in circulation. So the more we print, the more the dollars that you're holding in your bank are going down, 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 worthless. I think the dollar is worth like 1 to 3 cents based on, what we know in terms of inflation. So in terms of, we now can kind of get a picture. The Federal Reserve was never really designed to serve you and me, the American people. It was actually designed to control them, right? So from Jekyll Island to Nixon taking us off the gold standard, which is really a betrayal of the American people. It was treasonous what he did because the Constitution is very clear on the matter. We have an inflationary treadmill that we're all running like heck to keep up with, and the dollar is now clearly weaponized against us. So if that's the case, let's talk about this perpetual debt cycle as we wrap this up, because we've got about a minute left. Is there anything that the American people can do?
Well, I think they need to abolish the Fed, first off. And maybe, like you said at the beginning of the show, Ann, that is what President Trump is attempting to do here. Raise the debt and collapse the Fed, and get them gone. We also need to be standing up a new system to take its place. If we can collapse it and if we can get it gone, we just can't have a vacuum. So we need reliable monetary systems in place to take its place. And we're seeing that with crypto and all these other means that are coming forward. So, time will tell. It's going to be an interesting year.
Time will tell. All right, when we come back, we're going to be talking about reclaiming sovereignty, because at the end of the day, that is what I believe President Trump is doing, and that's what Americans are really struggling to find that path forward right now. Stick with us. We'll be right back.
July 6, 2005. This is Tom Harper. Man figures plankton stopped his rare cancer. We got more of a response from our viewers than anything else you and I have ever discussed.
Tom Harper, 20 years ago, he had mesothelioma, deadly, lung cancer, was given weeks to live, and he just intuitively started to eat the phytoplankton out of his fish tanks because he fed the phytoplankton to his shellfish. He was a shellfish farmer. And when he went in for the surgery, the surgeon came out of the operating room and told his family, I have not ever seen anything like it. The cancer is benign, and Tom Harper lived for years. He retired in Hawaii. We're not making any claim.
Here he is in his own words.
Started on a daily routine of just taking a bit of paste, putting it in my mouth, and wash it down with a drink of water. Within about 10 to 15 days, here I am, less pain in my back. I knew that something was going on, so I just kept eating half a teaspoon of this paste a day. I was booked to go for surgery in Victoria where they were going to do what they call a talc treatment. They went in there to have a look, saw something they never seen before, took 11 sites, sent them away for biopsy. I got the news back. Everything was benign. They just did not know what to make of it. Everything was absolutely clean. And I've tried dieting all my life because I'm a diabetic. If it's a coincidence or not, I don't know. My blood sugar started dropping. My weight started falling off. Here I am, no longer requiring insulin, and I was taking 88 units a day of insulin. I can eat just about what I want in moderation, and I have no elevated sugar levels, and I feel fabulous.
People, you hear the word cancer, and they want you to be instilled with fear. Cancer is nothing but a profound failure of the immune system. And what happened with Tom Harper is the phytoplankton is microscopic. It's God's microscopic food. And the Gadatiana is the most nutritionally comprehensive strain phytoplankton in the world. David Hunter studied phytoplankton for 20 years because he worked for Tom Harper and he was there in person and witnessed Tom's recovery. It's about getting pure nutrition inside your cells. And what happens, your body balances again or goes back to homeostasis. And when your body is pH balanced or in homeostasis, disease can't grow. It is literally microscopic, pure single cell plant food with protein and omega-3 fatty acids, omega-6 fatty acids, with amino acids and vitamins and minerals. One scoop a day. There's 90 billion plant cells in here just for everyday nutrition and energy and, cognitive support, because this is God's pure nutrition.
Go to melissahousegpa.com today. Discover the science and learn more about the wonderful benefits of Gadatana phytoplankton. That's melissahousegpa.com. melissahousegpa.com.
And welcome back to American Made. In the second segment, we're going to talk about sovereignty because, frankly, this is what Americans are trying to achieve. And we're trying to achieve it on a daily basis, even at the most fundamental levels. Just starting your own business. It's about being independent and not working for the man. And unfortunately, we have been, raised in this country to believe if you get that great corporate job and you're putting money into your 401k and you're getting stock options, you are going to be set for life. Well, what we've learned now is that unfortunately, your salaries at these big corporations just aren't keeping up with the cost of living. And the cost of living is being driven by an out-of-controlled private banking cartel, a group of international thugs, in fact, that go back centuries. These are families that are controlling the international banking system. We talked about the City of London in the first segment, and now the City of London is really the cartel that is driving what we see in terms of instability and attacks on other nation sovereignty around the world. The same institution is bankrupt. And the reason they're bankrupt is they have printed debt into an oblivion. And the American people who have been the debt slaves that have been funding the interest on this debt for others around the world, and that we've used our dollars to basically, and hyperinflated dollars at that, at the expense of other countries who are trying to buy, and they were forced to buy goods and oil in US dollars. They've decided they've had enough. This is why BRICS exists. They've been around for almost 30 years, and they've come together. And wouldn't you know that the BRICS countries out there right now are trading with themselves peacefully. They're not at war with each other at all, particularly. Well, there's a little skirmish going on between Pakistan and India, but not all those. India's in, but Pakistan is not. So just know that Pakistan is not in BRICS yet. So these countries that are looking at getting into, until they settle their issues, they're not going to be admitted, because BRICS is, like President Trump, using trade to bring in world peace. And when they have a trade imbalance between countries inside of BRICS, how are they settling those debts? With gold. Why gold? Because it's the only sound money. This is exactly what our founding fathers understood when they put that into the Constitution. So joining me back again for this cycle, the second segment, I should say, is Maureen Steele. Maureen, we're, trying to look at this whole situation that we're in. We're totally tangled up in debt, filing income taxes and these crazy tax laws. And really, the only people who aren't paying taxes are the super wealthy, because they have figured out other financial vehicles and other legal instruments that allow them to shelter money, whether it's offshore or onshore, but it's out of their name. And again, so they look like they own nothing. Didn't Klaus Schwab say you're going to own nothing and be happy? So we have the ability to break this cycle. And I'm seeing a lot of these little ideas popping up on Instagram feeds where people look like you and me are coming up with really easy solutions that don't seem so difficult anymore. And it's using trusts. What do you know about the trusts that would protect you from ever having, say, the income tax man cometh after you for money you may or may not owe?
Sure. Well, trusts are a great way to go, to stick it to the man, and as they say,
Yeah.
because it gets everything out of your personal name. So when you start a trust, you get an EIN number. So it's not your social security number. So it's not, you can name it ABC Trust. And you put your home in there. You can put your car in there. You create bills of sale where you sell your car, to the trust. So it shows that the trust owns it. You get your car re-registered in the name of the trust. So you just create it so that you own nothing. There's many different kinds of trusts. There's trust that you can, there's irrevocable, there's revocable. So some trusts you can edit as you're still alive. Others, once you write it, you sign it, it's done. You can't change it ever again. So there's many different vehicles and avenues. There's also common law trust that you can do a trust completely in the private. And it's the signature and the notary. The notary is actually the lawyer in this case, notarizing that this is your desire. You can keep that just in your drawer at home with notice to your family: if I pass, this is my trust. So yeah, there's many different kinds, but that's a great way. Also, just using alternative like Bitcoin, using alternative means of purchase. Bitcoin is accepted anywhere at this point. Banks use it. You can get loans against it. You can finance things utilizing Bitcoin. So that's another great way to go. But people are getting clever, like you just said, and they're stepping out of this public, being a chattel for the state and getting into the private. And it's the way to go.
Yeah, it really is. And there's an example that comes to mind of somebody who was able to circumvent the COVID mandates. Remember, these mandates are coming out of an agency and they were being enforced by local municipalities. There's a gentleman by the name of Ian Smith. He owns a gym in New Jersey. And during COVID, he kept his gym open, like some brave pastors kept their church open, because heaven forbid, people wanted to get together and worship. But again, people were traveling on planes, they were going to football games, and they were wearing masks. So if you felt that you needed to wear a mask, that's your choice, but you could go to the gym and work out. But yet they decided that exercise was non-essential, but that strip bars were, of all hypocrisy. So this gentleman, Ian Smith, kept his gym open. He was fined, he was imprisoned, and then they closed his gym down. Well, when he got through that, he reopened his gym. But what he did differently, he took himself out of an LLC. He had a statutory corporation in the state of New Jersey as an LLC. I don't recall the name of his gym. But he went from that and he took it into the private. Like you said, you have public trusts, which are statutory and they could be revocable or irrevocable, or you could do a common law, which is in the private. So he took himself out of that statutory regulation and he brought himself into the private as a private member organization or private member association, PMA. And his gym members all signed paperwork that said they're a member of this gym, the private member association. Maureen, did you know that the cops were called again? And this time when the police came and saw his paperwork, he held it up. They said, "Oh, you're out of our jurisdiction. You're private. We have no jurisdiction because you are not organized in the public and according to their public statutory, laws and rules for municipality. So what you're saying is get your stuff together, but perhaps would it be better to go into the private as a private common law trust versus the statutory revocable or irrevocable? What would you do? What makes you sleep at night?
What I've done is I have a private trust. And this just goes to show the doubters that there is common law. Like you just said, Ann, when he showed them the PMA, he's in the common law, he's in the private, he's not in the public, and he's out of their jurisdiction, and they simply can't touch you. So yes, I've done it. It's not a complicated process. It doesn't even involve lawyers, so it's even better. It doesn't cost anything to do it. You just need the right paperwork, and everyone should do it. You should put everything you own in that trust, your dog. I know people, and I've never seen this challenged, but I know people that have put their children in it, minor children in their private trust, to try to prevent CPS or anyone from coming in. That the children, it's your property, they're minors, that's your DNA. They've actually put their children in their private trust. So I would highly encourage everyone to do that. We need to get out of this tyrannical system, and remove ourselves from being their chattel.
Right. I agree with you. And, when you protect yourself like that, all of a sudden you become a little bit braver and a little more emboldened. And you might start to say things that people need to hear that might go contrary to the public opinion of what they believe to be true. In other words, the Federal Reserve. Frankly, we don't need it. President Trump has alluded to that there's issues with it. He's obviously not real happy with the guy at the Fed right now. But the public should stand up and they should say, we need to audit the Federal Reserve because the Federal Reserve has been generating mass inflation. We should be auditing the gold at Fort Knox. And I think that, at this point, if people felt like their assets were protected and if they decided to stop paying income tax because as many former employees of the IRS have come forward, Joe Bannister comes to mind most recently. I was in contact with him. They'll tell you there is no law that says people have to pay taxes on their income. There is no law. It was never enacted into positive law, Title 26. So this is a complete hoax that's been on these people for a long time. So would auditing the Federal Reserve be a critical step, do you think, in restoring the financial transparency? And should we actually, sort of pass a demand of a Federal Reserve Transparency Act so that we can see what's in there?
Oh, I think we should definitely have the transparency but I also think it needs to be abolished. I think abolish it and then get all their records and see what these people have been doing for generations now. It's so despicable that they're supposed to, in their charter, it says they control the inflation rates, and all they're doing is causing more. Let the free markets run. But every time they print money, and that's who authorizes it, is always the Fed. The president can ask for them to authorize more money printing, and they always do it until our dollar is worth something like 31 cents now. Also, you just reminded me of the gold in Fort Knox. Elon Musk had said not too long ago that he wanted to get in there and see it. It never happened, and it just makes me think there is no gold in there, or there's half the gold we thought there was in there. I think a lot of our wealth has been siphoned off, and they don't want us to know. There's very large powers out there, the deep state. They don't want to be outed, and it's leaking out. Things are leaking out now, slowly but surely, and the mask is coming off. But it's all kinds of ugly behind that mask, that's for sure.
It is all kinds of ugly. Definitely is all kinds of ugly. Again, we've got to continue to push for people to understand their role, their civic duty, and to take the, scales off of their eyes and realize that the Federal Reserve has turned you into a debt slave. The entire system is designed from the corporate construct, which is why when people leave and they start mom and pop shop businesses, they were the first ones attacked during COVID because they want to put you back into the corporate debt slave cycle, which of course is supported by the financial instruments known as the income tax, which of course the corporations act as the tax collector on behalf of the federal government. They are out there to issue as a withholding agent. And then of course the Federal Reserve, which, we are using that income tax to pay the interest on all that money that is getting printed. So in the next segment, we're going to talk about parallel systems, parallel economies, and local barter networks. Again, Bitcoin and all these other cryptocurrencies that are popping up are going to be, I think, absolutely critical to us getting off of the Federal Reserve, getting away from FedNow, and using other networks like XRP in replacement of SWIFT, which is the banking, mechanism, the transactional highway that moves money that takes 3 to 5 days. You can send an email in 3 to 5 seconds, but you can't move money in 3 to 5 days. Come on. Stick with us. We'll be right back here on American Made. More coming up next.
Better science leads to better outcomes. So by understanding the science in much more intimate detail, delivering a value product that is so different from anybody else.
So when we're stepping outside into seasonal changes, low humidity, sunlight, pollution, all of these things get communicated as stress on the top layer of skin that produces free radicals, and they're bad news for collagen networks. They're going to break down the collagen network and collapse that beautiful tensile strength of your skin. And so that's how we end up with fine lines and wrinkles. Bella Grace is really an elevated formula.
Better than the competition for very obvious reasons. First of all, we're delivering great collagen. We're delivering Verisol, which is the world's most studied form of collagen. So we're starting at a foundation that's really top notch.
So here is a lady today. She's taken the elixir, arthritis in her hands. She could not close her hands and make a fist. But after now being on the elixir, now she can.
The real breakthrough discovery, particularly with the cat's claw, it's a switch that regulates genes. There's thousands of genes that are involved in that inflammation process. When you have chronic inflammation, the problem is the switch is on and it's not being turned off. And so what's happening with the cat's claw is that it removes that little protein switch off your DNA, and the genes go back to a dormant state, and you go back to being, well, really healthy.
When at first we wanted to just have an amazing collagen ingestible product to be able to set the skin up so that my wife, Christina, could come behind that with incredible skincare. And that's exactly what we're still doing. What we weren't anticipating was the magnitude and just the vast amount of benefits that this elixir was going to do for people. Testimonies started flooding back in. About probably 30% of the testimonies were about hair, skin, and nails. The others were about people being able to walk up their stairs again, people being able to open their hands in the morning without having to do heat therapy, people being able to sleep better, athletes before and after recovery, and the energy levels that people were having. So we realized that this is so much more than just a collagen ingestible product, which it certainly is that at the highest of levels. We've even had so many people in the health and wellness world say this is legitimately, Brian, the number one, the best health and wellness product that's ever been introduced. And I would say probably the only negative here with Bella Grace and this elixir is that it sounds too good to be true, but it really is true.
Bella Grace Elixir, a scientific breakthrough with over 80 clinical trials. Visit melissahousebg.com to discover Bella Grace Elixir and the full range of Bella Grace products.
And welcome back to segment 3 here on American Made. We're talking about bartering. We're talking about how you can create a parallel economy and how you can leverage your assets to generate income. But again, keeping all of this out of your name and in a trust, as Maureen Steele just talked about in the previous segment, is going to be critical, so that if you ever find yourself in a legal situation where somebody's coming after you and wants access to your assets, well, if you don't own anything and you own nothing, as Klaus Schwab says, I guess you're happy because there's nothing for them to take, but you're able to take the ability of the store of value that those assets have and generate income for yourself. So joining me again now is Maureen Steele. Maureen, in the previous segments, we've talked about how the Federal Reserve has been raping and pillaging their way through our chattel selves here and monetizing us and turning us into these debt slaves. But there's always been a parallel economy, right? There's always been, I mean, look at Facebook Marketplace, right? You can barter on Facebook Marketplace for your widget, for their widget. And if you guys agree that the widgets are worth the same, you might do a trade, or you may actually supplement something with some green dollars, or maybe you'll use gold or Bitcoin. But the parallel economy is there, and it's happening everywhere. So where goods and services are actually exchanged outside of traditional financial institutions, these are becoming really popular, Maureen. So when you look at gold, silver, and real estate, gold and silver, if you own it, you have it, you can exchange it. But your real estate, your property, if you want to barter with that, what are the encumbrances that you would, be challenged with before you could actually use that as a store of value for yourself without the encumbrance of the federal government, or excuse me, state government?
Right. So what most people don't understand, Anne, is that they don't own their land. President Trump doesn't own the land Mar-a-Lago sits on. He doesn't own the land Trump Tower sits on. None of us own our property. You have to have a Lloydial title. And what they did to us, prior to that, you couldn't sell land. You could bequeath it. You could leave it to your children. It wasn't for sale necessarily. When they put in the zip code system, it's like if you can imagine the land and picture like saran wrap being laid right over it, and they drew on it, all the zip codes and all the plots of land. That system is really what took all the ownership. The state and the country and England own all the land. You don't own anything. You wouldn't pay taxes on something you own. And people should pay attention to this, because their car is the same thing. You have to keep registering your car. That's because you signed the title over to the state. You do the same thing when you buy a home. Your deed isn't what shows ownership. It's the title that does, and the title company does that, and the title registers it to the state. And if you see, when you sign all that paperwork, it shows that you're the tenant on there. And you can ask about it, and people have done it. I did it the first time I bought a house. I was young, and I said, why am I listed as the tenant here when I'm the owner? They're like, oh no, that's just a word they use. So you never really get the full explanation, even from the title companies, because they don't know. We all just think this is how it goes, but it's a schnookering. It was the theft of our property. They leveraged this on us, and we didn't know. But when you're foreclosed on, and the bank comes in and they take your home, and the state assists and the police come in, that's when you know you don't own anything. You own a house. It's your largest asset, and it's sitting on land you don't own. And so they can come and take it at a moment's notice, and they do it. And not only do they do it, they take all of your equity in it as well. So if you have a $500,000 house and you owe $250 on it, and you default, they take the whole house, all your equity and everything. It's not like they say, here's your $250,000, and in your equity that you've paid for, we're taking the house and we're going to sell it and recoup our $250 that you still owe us on. They don't do that. They just take everything. So I had this case, and you saw this, Cataspinda. It was in the state of Washington, where she actually got a Lloydial title to her property, and they sold it anyway. They just completely ignored the fact that, and they resold a house that the bank did, to people who don't own the land. Like, she actually owns the land her old house sits on. And so they're just ignoring a lot of things. The registry of deeds in the counties, there's registry of deeds that I've spoken to people that won't even allow a Lloydial title to be registered there. They don't want you to own your land. And so that's one of the major problems, is people, their biggest asset is their home, and they don't own the land it sits on, literally.
To me, that is the most egregious act that the government, and this is now down at the county level. Let's be clear, this is a county level issue, and hat tip to here in Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis is questioning the need for property taxes, and property taxes in Florida are ridiculously steep, by the way, some of the steepest in the nation. And people are always shocked when they come here, and that's why the Homestead Act is so important, because you can at least and they do have portability with it. You can at least freeze your assessed value so it only accrues 3% per year. It can't go up more than 3% in terms of an assessment. So if your property is a $1 million property, they value it 85% of that 850,000. And then from there, it can only assess, 3% per year on top of that, which, is still a lot when you add things up, because again, at the end of the day, when real estate hits the skids and properties go down, they don't adjust unless you petition, which means you have to go to the man and say, please, our real estate economy has crashed. My house isn't worth $1 million anymore. It's worth 750. I need you to reassess me at 85% of that and, adjust. Are they going to give you any money back on that, Maureen, if that assessment comes through?
Never. No. And again, let's address that end. That's part of the Fed's problem. Housing prices, I'm going to use a friend of mine who bought a house in Maine a year and a half ago, built it, brand new property, got it for like $535. Now the house is worth like $830. They finished the basement and did some landscaping. They didn't put in gold-plated countertops. That is unnatural, gain in that market. That's unnatural. And it's due to the dollar, largely to the dollar being worth less. That house isn't worth that much more. It's just that the dollar is, dwindling, and it's because of the Fed, and they keep printing fiat dollars. And so prices go up, but it's not a real reflection of the value of it. It's just that's why it's going up, because the dollar's worth less.
Yeah. Again, this is all attributed back to the central banking cabal. Mm-hmm. And this is the same banking cabal. I'm going to kind of recap this again, because I think people really need to understand this. And I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but when the City of London, was established, you had the Rothschild family, the Morgan family, that all came together, and others that created this international banking cabal, from which the Fed is a branch of that cabal. Everything rolls up to the Bank of International Settlements, which connects all the central banks around that are on that system. And that system uses the SWIFT network. The SWIFT network is what moves money around the world. And last year, I think it was last year, maybe a year and a half ago, when Joe Biden was still the resident mushroom, he removed Russia, Putin specifically, but he removed Russia off the SWIFT financial network, so that the Western banking economy was basically severed. Our ability to, move money to Russia became hindered because Russia was kicked off SWIFT, which is why Russia expedited the need to transact in gold. Again, they are like, well, we don't need to take your paper fiat fake money, so we're now going to be, moved into gold more quickly. And that, I think, was sort of a blessing in disguise for them when you look at it, because as I stated earlier, the BRICS countries are transacting trade imbalances in gold. So if Brazil is trading with, India, for instance, on coffee beans, right? And India bought more coffee beans and other things from Brazil than the other way around, and they have a trade imbalance, they're going to settle the difference in gold, which I think is fantastic, which is why we're seeing gold move all over the world at a rapid pace, and why gold is appreciating so quickly, because it's scarce, number one. And number two, it's also keeping up with the price of inflation based in US dollars. So, buying gold 2 years ago, you got it for $1,600, $1,700 an ounce. Today, you're getting it for $3,300, pushing $3,400 an ounce. And economies like JP Morgan, or banks like JP Morgan and others, are talking about $4,000 and $5,000 an ounce gold. So this is where you're going to get your stability. And when you have a Federal Reserve driving interest rates up, the housing market is unfortunately negatively impacted, because people can't afford the mortgage. That same $1 million house, your mortgage goes through the roof. Whereas 5 years ago, you could have paid, half the mortgage rate. So Maureen, if, as we wrap this up here, we got about a minute left. I want to just drive it home. Sovereignty for Americans comes in the forms of, financial freedom. It comes in the form of owning your assets wholly outright, and it comes in the form of protecting your assets in trust so that people can't come after you. Is there anything I'm missing that you would do as yourself, in terms of trying to protect yourself from the man, the government?
Yeah, you just nailed it. But I think also just using crypto. I mean, I'm looking into that right now myself. Is getting away from the dollar. I think everyone's going to be getting away from the dollar, and it's very well known around the world, like you said, Anne, that it's fiat, it's false, fake, phony, and it's monopoly money, and they just keep printing more of it. So that's all thanks to the Fed and our previous presidents. Again, this is all unconstitutional. The Fed is unconstitutional. Printing fiat dollars is unconstitutional, and everyone over, all these generations who's participated in that have broken the law. I mean, they're criminals as far as I'm concerned, and they really have harmed the American people, especially the middle class. They've just gutted it.
Yeah, they really have. Okay, in our final segment, when we come up, we're going to tease out a little bit about what Maureen and I have been working on this past week. We were up in Boston and we were shooting a documentary called Taken, sorry, called Taken, state-sponsored CPS, state-sanctioned kidnapping. We're going to tease that out a little bit because I think you need to understand, they look at us as chattel. And these agencies are grabbing our children as chattel because there is a monetization attached to children. As we've talked about, CPS is a big hot topic right now. So we're going to dive into that. Don't go anywhere. You're going to hear more about Taken, state-sanctioned kidnapping, and how your child is really at the mercy of the state.
What if there was a product that could help you control cravings, burn more fat, boost your metabolism, promote healthy blood glucose levels, lower inflammation, optimize insulin sensitivity, support healthy blood lipid levels, and support healthy blood pressure? Introducing Bellatrim.
My wife has been taking Bellatrim now, and she said, Brandon, we've really got to promote this because people don't understand this isn't just about a comprehensive weight management. It will help regulate your blood glucose levels. It will lower bad cholesterol. Overall, it's good for your cardiac health. And she said there's a lot of science behind this.
G'day, I'm Dr. Mark Miller for Bella Grace, and I'd like to have a chat with you about Bellatrim, our comprehensive weight management product. Now, most people early on will register a reduction in cravings associated with Bellatrim. How does it do that? Well, it does it by changing the levels of hormones that are associated with either hunger or satiety. It lowers the levels of ghrelin, a hunger hormone, and it raises the levels of GLP-1, the satiety hormone. There is an absolutely fascinating action on a metabolic switch called AMP kinase, AMPK. AMPK is associated with the preferential burning of fat as a metabolic fuel. And as a result, you have a reduction in visceral fat and reduction in waist circumference. It also helps regulate blood glucose. Blood glucose is a huge factor in weight management. It also improves your microbiome. We do that by several ways. One, there's an ingredient in there that stimulates greater diversity. And the other one is prebiotics, FOS and GOS, that help feed the good bacteria, gentrify your microbiome. So, Bellatrim, comprehensive. Enjoy it.
To learn more about Bellatrim and other Bella Grace products, visit melissahousebg.com.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. I want to thank you for all your support at wvwfoundation.com that helps make possible pushing out 24/7 content for free. Without your support, we'd have to put it all behind a paywall. But thanks to you and your support through our foundation, we're able to push it out for free as a broadcast service and broadcast ministry of WVW Foundation. Please consider going there and setting up an automatic monthly contribution, or go there and make an occasional contribution. If you prefer to support us through the mail, you'll find our mailing address there at wvwfoundation.com. You can also call and make your contribution over the phone by calling 901-825-0652. That's 901-825-0652. Again, all these details are available at wvwfoundation.com. Thank you for your support as we try to help people around the world understand the times through the lens of a Christian worldview.
welcome back. In our final segment, we're going to talk about what we will be expanding more on next week on the show American Made. Don't forget, tune in weekly here on Worldview Tube. It airs at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central on the great Brandon House Network. We appreciate the ability to bring this information to you on those. So shout out to the folks over at Worldview Tube. Logan, thank you for producing this show for us every week. We think this is important content. Maureen Steele and I were recently up in Boston, in Massachusetts, for the past week, where we were looking into a state-sanctioned kidnapping where children were taken in Massachusetts, but they were actually taken at gunpoint in Texas, the Rivera family case. And we have a documentary coming out called Taken, State-Sanctioned Kidnapping. It'll be out in about a month. And I think this is going to be a very important look because dovetailing this documentary, we are launching a federal lawsuit, which will cross two jurisdictions, the state of Massachusetts and the state of Texas. Maureen's joining me again. Maureen, let's talk about this because this is a very, very big subject. And this subject, unfortunately, impacts millions and millions of families across these beautiful United States, where an agency completely violates your constitutional rights. I mean, just throws that piece of paper right out the window and says, we're taking your children because, well, a teacher called and said that there was a bruise on little Johnny, or a pediatrician called, as in the case of the Rivera family, and said the family refused a vitamin K shot for their 9-month-old. And they've taken families and just shaken them upside down, destroyed them, kept the parents separated, and the children farmed out. This is not what our framers had in mind when they decided to, organize these United States under a umbrella of a constitution. So, kind of walk us through this, what we're going to be expecting coming from our documentary, because I think it's quite a remarkable piece that we managed to put together.
Yeah, well, the story is incredible, and sadly, as we've learned, Anne, it's not unique. It's not a one-off. This is happening in every state to thousands of people in every state all across the country, and it's happening every single day. These family courts are unconstitutional. When you would have more rights if you robbed a bank or murdered someone than if you are dealing with CPS going into family court. There's no presumption of innocence. There's no jury of your peers. There's no due process. There's none of that. Service, let's just start with service in family court, even with CPS. If I was going to sue you for, theft or anything like that, I would have to have that suit sent to you from a sheriff, a process server. I would have to prove that. In family court, all I have to do is say I put a stamp on it and mailed it. And if you don't get it, and everyone knows mail gets lost all the time. So you don't have to even have proper notification. Now, if you don't show up for your hearing because you didn't even know there was an action started against you or a hearing in the first place, they hold it without you. And that's it. And it stands. You can't go back and say, I didn't get it. They don't care. They will just tell you, well, so-and-so says they mailed it to you. There's zero proof there. So let's just start with that. Also, there's no presumption of innocence. If CPS says goes to the court with a emergency order, an ex parte order saying we have to remove this child because the teacher called and said there was a bruise on this child, we think he's being abused by his parents, that's it. The judges just rubber stamp that. According to the Chevron deference, they can't do that anymore. But again, there's no presumption of innocence there. If they say it, then they're going to take the kids, they're going to blow your family up and ask questions later. And unfortunately, in what we've seen, Anne, is that they never come back later and go, oh, we made a mistake. Once they start down this road, they know there's liability. And so they'll make up anything they need to. We have uncovered in our documentary and with many people we've spoken to across the country is CPS making up evidence. Doctors involved in this are altering their records. The FBI has altered records. It's an incredible system. But what we also learned in this process with Hillary Clinton's penned, Adoption and Safe Family Act, you put money on kids' heads, you are ripe for corruption. This has turned into, an $80 billion a year industry. Even Mike Pompeo in his report to the president in 2017, stated that the foster care system is the largest purveyor of children into the sex slave industry. So, and we're in 2025. That's 8 years ago, and it still has, or 7 years ago, hasn't been looked into. That's just incredible. And they don't want it looked into, Anne, because it's a money-making machine.
Right.
And it's so tangled. We have the family courts involved. We got judges involved. We've got all these CPS workers, all the parasitic agencies around them, the visitation centers, the parenting classes, the anger management classes, your county mental health centers, a lot of the doctors in the area, a lot of these children's hospital have a doctor on staff just for abuse cases. Well, like in most instances, when they say they're there to help with abuse, no, they're there to traffic your kids. They're there to move your kids right into the system, and they get kickbacks for it. So our documentary highlights an incredible case, the Rivera family case, that encompasses an awful lot of this. But as you know, Anne, we've been collecting evidence on our website. Thousands of people coming forward with cases of judicial malfeasance and crimes being committed against them by CPS. And then there's cops, there's sheriffs that all go along with this, that are depriving people of their rights, not upholding their rights, and stripping them of their children, and ruining families. I believe this is calculated. You destroy the American family. That is the backbone of society, and you can take over, can take over a nation. And haven't they just done that? So,
and they have. And again, when President Trump says, we're going to make America great again, you can't make America great without the American family being great. And they are under attack right now by rogue agencies that are receiving money off the backs, again, of the American people. The same people that created the Federal Reserve also created the idea of Social Security. And again, tying your Social Security number to you and leveraging Social Security accounts, namely the Social Security Administration, which falls under Health and Human Services, the largest budgeted agency in this country, almost $3 trillion, which Secretary Kennedy is in charge of. That SSA is what's financing these CPS agencies around the country. That Title IV-E funding that you've written about is dispersed to all 50 states, for which the states have matching, they have to match the funds, 75% federal, 25% state. But again, the cottage industries, the parasitic cottage industries that you've discussed are what is driving the trafficking of these children, as Mike Pompeo did notice in his trafficking in persons report to the Secretary of State's office during the Trump administration. He talked about the foster system was the most prolific place for pedophiles to come and prey on children, to traffic them and turn them into sex slaves or forced labor or whatever. And there's a lot worse whatevers that is happening to these children, which is why we have so many missing children in this country. 500,000 children right now are in the foster care system nationwide, 10,000 in Massachusetts alone. So where we were, Maureen, is sort of, it's sort of the belly of the beast of just true communism. And the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, unfortunately, has fallen prey to the people that believe that you should own nothing and be happy, and not because you're going to have a trust to protect your assets. It's because they're going to literally take everything from you to make sure you're on that debt slave hamster cycle. And your children, like your cars, are sort of titled property, which, to me, if I'm a parent and I have a pediatrician telling me I have to do something, and I'm reading a lot of things that's contraindicated to what they're telling me, it's contrary to possibly not being a good idea, how does the state seem to just get away with that and say, report the parent? I don't understand how the state can back that up. I mean, they're just breaking the law, right? It's flat out breaking the law.
It is. It absolutely is. I mean, so I try to explain this. When anyone calls in a mandatory reporter, which again is a gross system, again, a Hillary Clinton brainstorm, when anyone calls into CPS, it's considered a screen in or a screen out. A screen out is, I saw a little boy walking down the street with no jacket on. This is the third time. They might say screen out. We're not investigating that. A screen in is when they investigate it, where they think there's enough there that it warrants them having a further look. A doctor, this Dr. Gohafar, in Massachusetts, in Fitchburg, who called CPS, threatened the family for not getting the vitamin K shot, which incidentally is always given at birth. And they tell you at birth, it's to help with clotting. Most babies don't have problems with clotting, but they just give it as quote unquote a safety feature. It's not that. So there was no need to give this 9-month-old child that. He obviously is doing just fine. He's a healthy child by all accounts. So the doctor threatened the family. He calls CPS. Immediately when CPS got that phone call, they never should have opened up an investigation because it's every parent's right to deny a shot for their child. So they launched this investigation, and then, it was a dog. It was a total loser of an investigation, and they know it. So they change tacks. Then they start digging into your past and try to find, well, can we link this to something else? So then they switched it on this family to domestic violence, when there's never been a call of domestic violence on this family. But there was something in the father's past when he was a kid that, he was violent. I mean, if you dig, what they say is, show us the person and we'll find the crime. I mean, if you dig into people's past enough, you can find something they can latch onto, even though there's nothing that has to do with the now, with this family. It's really disgusting. And what's worse is it's not just CPS doing it. We're talking about judges rubber stamping this, judges saying it's okay, people who have sworn an oath to uphold your rights and my rights and the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the state of Massachusetts, and they're simply just not doing it. They're trampling it, and they're destroying families and children.
And that is in fact what I think the goal is of this, unfortunately, of the entire agency structure. Is not to help, it's to profit. Maureen, we've got to end it here. We've got so much more to talk about. We're going to take a deeper dive on this next week. So please come back, join us at 7 p.m. Eastern for another edition. This will be our third edition of American Made, and we're going to call this one Enslaved by Agency, the Unchecked Power of CPS. You're not going to want to miss this, and I believe we're going to get some guests on who have been victims of the system. Thanks again for joining us here on American Made on Worldview Tube.